This episode of What the Tech is brought to you by Harry's. For guys like you who want a great shave experience at a fraction of what you're paying. Go to harrys.com and get $5 off your first purchase by entering the code WhatTheTech when you check out.
What the Tech?
Hey everybody, welcome to What the Tech. I'm Andrew Zarin, of course. I'm joined by the one, the only, the beautiful Paul Thurrott.
How you doing?
How are you, Paul?
Pretty good.
Pretty good. We had fun last week. You were in New York for the week. You came down with your entire family. You drove. I had your car all week. I went on joy rides, and
thank you for that.
I parked it in the South Bronx.
The way I sort of pictured it is that scene from Ferris Bueller where the guys steal the car and it goes over in the air and they play the Star Wars music.
Yeah.
I pictured you in the car, just like, enjoying it.
Luckily for you, we are like 5 blocks away from the train, so.
Yeah.
I did get paranoid, actually, because the day that I brought the car back to you, Paul came in from the city, took the Long Island Railroad, came to Bayside, and I dropped the car off to him. And I misread the that Paul had put for for that he was coming in, and I read it as 9:36. So I jumped out of bed at like 9:10, and I was like, I got to get there. So I parked the car, and I was like, I wonder what time Paul's coming. And then I looked and said, we're leaving at around 9:30. So I just parked the car there. I've got a meter, and I put the sticker in there. And then realized...
I'm sorry to interrupt, but to be fair to you, I think the way I phrased it was, we're on the 9:30 train.
9:36,
which you could, or whatever, you could conceivably have read as meaning that...
No, it was me. It was me. Okay. It's all my fault. So I bought, I put the tag because I parked the car, and I went and I got a bagel. And then I realized, I came back, I left the tag in there for like 9 o'clock. I'm like, oh man, is he going to think I went out with his car? And I just drove around town with the car. And I was like, what am I doing? What am I thinking? He knows I didn't do that. Or did I? This may be a big ploy. I could have possibly just gone for an adventure with your car. But it was all good. You had fun, right?
Yeah, it was a good trip.
Yeah. Excellent. And then we'll talk about some... we hung out on Wednesday. Wednesday night? Yeah, or Thursday night. Wednesday night, which was fun. Which we'll talk about that on the post show. Paul, there's so much happening this week. Mobile World Congress is happening in Europe, in Barcelona. A lot of interesting things coming out of there. There was one thing I wanted to talk to you about. I also want to touch on the Apple and the U.S. government issue that's happening right now. But before we do that, I want to talk about our sponsor, and that's Harry's. Paul uses a Harry's razor. I use a Harry's razor, and you guys should also use a Harry's razor. This is why Harry's is so great. I'm tired of going to the store to buy these crazy, crazy expensive razors. I never do it anymore, actually, because one, it destroys my face. Like I have a very soft face, Paul. Two,
I could verify that, by the way.
He did touch my face, and he rubbed me down. And he said, wow, what a beautiful face.
Yes, he has the face of a small child.
And I can't use these razors, and when I do, it's a horrible experience. Too, whenever you buy these razors, it feels like you're like going and just buying like a $3,000 item. They lock it behind there, they come out, they gotta undo it. It's a whole procedure. It's a whole thing. With Harry's, they send it right to your door. Everything is easy breezy. They have a phenomenal set. They got the Winston, they got the Truman. I think, what do you have, the Winston or the Truman? I
always forget I have the olive plastic green handle, which I prefer to the metal one.
Yeah, okay. So I actually have both of them. And I use the metal one. I haven't used the plastic one, but I have it like still in the box, These are great gifts to give somebody in your life. These are great gifts for yourself. Why pay $32 for an 8-pack of blades when you could get them for half the price at harrys.com? They also have a great deal for our audience. Get $5 off your first purchase by entering the code WhatTheTech when you check out. Which is great. A lot of stuff. Birthdays, holidays, Father's Day is coming up in a couple months. I can't believe that. It's actually crazy how soon it is. Great guys, great company. I know a lot of you guys go and then you order Harry's razors anyway. They also have other side stuff. It's not they have the soaps. They got aftershave and stuff like that. Harry's.com. Use offer code What the Tech and get $5 off your first purchase. I want to thank Harry's for supporting the show and for, of course, supporting the GFQ network. Paul, let's talk about this.
Yep.
Where do we begin? Where do you want to start today, Paul? You pick. Do you want to start with the Apple conversation because it is fascinating?
Let's get that out of the way. Let's get this out of the way.
Let's break it down to the point that people could understand what's happening because there's a lot of this is all over the place.
Well,
go ahead.
But here's the problem. I'm sorry. Unfortunately, the way Apple has described it has completely misconstrued what's happening on a technical level, and what that has led people to do is turn this into an issue that has something to do with privacy, which it is not about privacy. Something to do with providing a backdoor to encryption on the phone, which is this is not about, and it's kind of colored the conversation a little bit. So I think a lot of people have opinions about this, don't necessarily understand what law enforcement is really asking of Apple, what Apple has, what their point is, why they're saying no to this. And I don't know. You remember we talked about, in fact, we might have been in front of press last week.
Yeah.
And at some point you said to me that you were kind of surprised by my take on this story because it seemed like at the time everyone was kind of backing up behind Apple, like they're doing the right thing and they're, playing, they care about our privacy, they care about our data. It's all a bunch of bullshit. Yeah, it has nothing to do with it.
Okay, so here's the nitty gritty of it. The government needs Apple to create the ability for them to access the terrorist, the San Bernardino shooter, the terrorist phone. They're at like 9 attempts. If you do 10 attempts, it wipes everything off the phone.
Yeah, is that true? I mean, is that always true, or do you have to turn that on?
I believe that's true.
Okay, it does.
I believe that's true. Yeah. So what can you just tell about break down the story a little bit so for the audience?
Well, in other words, starting with iOS 8, Apple enables automatic on-disk encryption of the data on an iPhone, and the way encryption works is that even the company that created the encryption can't break into it. You have to have a master key, and true encryption works in such a way that it's just not possible.
Yeah.
So Apple can honestly go back to law enforcement and say, hey, we can't actually help you. It's the way the system's designed. It's the way, BitLocker works.
But they have in the past, right? Is that the misconception that they have or they haven't? Because I've heard both stories.
No, Apple, like all other big high-tech companies that store people's data, has responded to law enforcement requests for information overwhelmingly positively, meaning they provided the data, because law enforcement doesn't just ask for data. They're not out there, we want to know more about this individual. They have search warrants. They have very specific criminal cases that they're going after very specific people for specific things. And they can prove in court that they are worthy of getting this information from an individual who's under investigation or already charged with a crime or whatever it might be. You can imagine in a case like a company like Microsoft, a lot of times that data will be in OneDrive or in Outlook.com or Office 365 up in the cloud, which is not up in a cloud. It's in a computer sitting in a data center somewhere on Earth, somewhere in the United States, somewhere outside of the United States. In Apple's case, before they encrypted data from iPhones, before they encrypted the data on iPhones, Apple could break into a phone very easily. But they also automatically, by default, back up stuff to iCloud. And if you refuse to do that, they kind of bug you to make sure your stuff's up in iCloud. Yeah. And Apple has overwhelmingly granted law enforcement access to data stored in iCloud. Difference between iCloud and an iPhone is that Apple holds the master key for the encrypted data that's in iCloud. In fact, we're sort of assuming they have encrypted data in iCloud. They say they do, but we don't really have any way of verifying that. And what they're trying to say here is that in order to break in, to break into the phone, for lack of a better term, really what they're doing
this specific phone, the what they're trying to do.
Yeah. Well, because this specific phone, but in the sense that it sets a precedent. What does this mean for the future? If Apple can break into a phone, then it means none of the data on your phone is safe. I think from a privacy perspective, I don't actually understand why unbreakable encryption is any individual's goal. Because me as a human being who does have some data on my phone, I probably hopefully don't have any data that's on my phone that isn't anywhere else. I mean, I don't want my data locked on my phone.
Sure.
I want it up in the cloud.
Yeah.
But should I die, should I be hit by a bus or, have a heart attack or whatever it is, I'd like my wife or my kids to be able to get into my accounts and to be able to get onto my devices and access that information. If my son or my wife or my mother or my friend Andrew from New York commits a heinous crime and murders people, I want law enforcement to get into that person's devices as well. Sorry, but I mean,
sure.
Common sense.
Listen, I don't think so. I haven't heard anybody say that they shouldn't be able to go into this guy's phone, right? The argument is
no, well, people are saying that. So
they are saying, they're lunatics that they should. It's the fact that how are they going to do it? Is the FBI going to do it? Is Apple going to do it? Are they going to be able to use this on other phones without having to go to Apple now? What's the long-term ramifications of doing this? That's the argument. That's the discussion that I'm hearing.
Right. So, unfortunately, for people who are either privacy fans or technology advocates or whatever it may be, I feel like we're moving down some inevitable slope where Apple is the provider of this technology, needs to, in a very closed situation, be able to break into these devices to provide law enforcement with the information they need. I really feel.
I think that's fine. I think that's perfectly fine.
Well, a lot of people don't think that's fine, but I want to say this in a way that I guess what I'm trying to say is, in a perfect world, it would be nice if I could have a perfectly undecryptable device that I could keep all my secrets on and all this stuff, and I sort of understand, people's point around that stuff. But as kind of a normal person who doesn't have secrets, I'm trying to keep from the government, or from anyone. I prefer to have my data replicated and available, everywhere. We talk about this a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that only criminals are the ones who want to hide data in this fashion, but it does aid criminals. And Apple, talks about backdoors and things, but a backdoor is like a public system. It's a thing that the FBI has that they could conceivably violate the public trust with and break into a phone even when they don't have a court's permission.
And that's the problem here. That's the discussion. And I don't know at this point. And I would love to listen. The people in the chat room
for that.
So that's not what's being said.
They're not
at
asking.
This point.
They're literally not asking.
So here's what I've heard from people that have not followed the story as well as you or our audience has. The FBI is requesting that Apple give them access to this phone. Apple says Apple has done this in the past. This is what people are saying. But the government wants them to create a special tool for them to do it themselves. They don't want Apple to do it. They want to do it.
No, that's not true.
Okay, that's what has been said to me over and over again. Not true. And
but that's
it's to the point that I think that is the fact at this point because it's been repeated so many times.
All right, but people hear things or read things and then they misconstrue what just happened. The change that has occurred is that Apple and now Google as well with Android is enabling encryption by default on devices. So it's possible to configure an iPhone where it doesn't back up any data to iCloud or any other service, and that the data is only on that phone. And if you don't have their fingerprint on the thing or their the code to break into it, that you could do the 10 attempts and it could wipe the data, and no one, Apple or anyone else, is never going to be able to get that data back. So what law enforcement is actually asking Apple to do is to build a tool that they use.
Oh, that said, Paul is gone. They heard him. They did not like what he said. Hey, you're there. You disappeared.
No, I didn't leave from me. So what they want is Apple to create a tool for Apple.
For Apple to use themselves.
Yeah. In other words, the deal is it's your phone. We get it. Here's a court order. we have a search warrant. We've searched this man's home. We've searched his car trunk in his car. We've searched his garage. We've searched his safe deposit box. Now we'd like to search his phone. We have a court order for that. You unlock it in your secure, super secret, Batman lair or whatever you keep your stuff. And then give us back the phone, and we'll or give us the data on the phone, however you want to do it. And that's all they're asking for.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. Here's a question for you, and I actually don't understand the implications of this.
Okay.
This is something I've been kind of pondering as I read all these kind of back and forths about what the FBI is really asking for, which, by the way, they have a nice blog post about what Apple says the FBI is asking for, which, by the way, they have a really nice blog post about that as well.
Yeah.
The FBI has asked for something that Apple could make, right? In other words, given that the iPhone is encrypted and that the data is protected, and that there is, like you said, a 10 attempt lock, that if you do the 10th attempt and you get the PIN wrong, all the data is erased.
Mm-hmm.
They've asked Apple to create a tool that will eliminate that 10 attempt list, which is an iOS feature. It's a feature of the operating system.
So they could essentially brute force into it.
Right.
Yeah.
So they build a robot that hits in all the codes until they get one that works, or however they do that. And it takes X amount of time. It's still going to take some time. 4 digits, whatever. Apple could build this thing. So you have to ask yourself, if Apple could build this thing, then that means that the fact that the data is encrypted on the phone kind of doesn't matter. Because if Apple can bypass the lock, because really the strength of the strength of the protection of the data is actually based on the strength of a 4-digit code.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, ultimately, right? The only thing that makes that not the case is that they have a limit of 10 attempts, which, by the way, I'm not 100% sure is in fact the default. I could be wrong, but it doesn't really matter. Let's just say if it is, whatever. Apple doesn't want to do that because of the precedent, blah, blah, blah. But, if Apple controls that tool, what's the difference? I mean, Apple's fans trust Apple. A lot of them are blindly backing up stuff to iCloud without a care in the world. They don't think anything of it.
Okay, so they've created the tool, they control the tool. So who's doing the brute forcing? Is it the FBI or are they doing it?
Well, if Apple provided a tool to bypass the 10 limit, then actually, I don't think it matters. In fact, I believe if you were to find that FBI blog post, I believe what they say is that Apple can do it. They don't. In fact, I think what they say is Apple can just provide us the information on the phone and destroy the phone. We don't care. We don't want the
just
phone.
Get the password. Yeah, just get us the password.
We all we want is the thing, the data on the phone, whatever it might be. By the way, there might be nothing on there incriminating.
It's quite possible there's nothing on there.
There's no way to know. It's protected.
So why has this spun into a major security and password issue at this point?
Because first of all, 40 to 50% of all smartphones in the United States are iPhones.
Yeah.
Okay. Apple's a very popular company. I don't know if you've been paying attention to this space.
I don't know.
They're kind of a big deal. All right. So that's one thing. We live in this post-Snowden world, right? Every time something like this happens, there's the privacy advocates who, like any consumer advocates of any kind, have a good central point. Protecting personal privacy is an important thing. And that whole debate around security versus privacy, which is one of those kind of religion, politics type debates that you're never going to arrive at an answer that pleases everybody.
Yeah.
And you see this with Microsoft and Windows 10 too, right? The privacy stuff in Windows 10 is so good, is so, I don't want to say perfect because no software is perfect, but is so perfectly adept for this day and age in which we live, that the only legitimate complaint, I'm sorry, it's not even legitimate, I'm sorry. The only major complaint that's been heard about Windows 10 has been about privacy. Privacy isn't Windows 10.
Yeah, it's too
it doesn't
invasive,
even have privacy issues, but the OS is so strong that Microsoft's critics have had to resort to privacy because privacy is a hot button issue.
Yeah.
So you kind of combine the broad popularity of iPhones in this country, the Snowden stuff, the whole fear of the government spying on us kind of baloney, I shouldn't discount it like that. People fear this stuff. It doesn't, people
And
believe
there
it.
is a valid. I'm listening. I think there's a valid claim. There's a valid fear with
Well,
that.
you know what though?
A
Here's
lot of
the,
this,
but
a lot of. I mean, I've heard conspiracy theories regarding, and I like conspiracy theories. I enjoy listening to them. And one of it is that the government has already been able to access the phone, and they just want a tool created. That's a realistic. That can happen,
well,
and I
by the way,
understand the
that's
fear.
I'll give you a conspiracy theory.
I want
The-
some. Give me
the
some, Paul.
The conspiracy theory is the government can easily break into this phone, but they can't admit that publicly,
Yeah.
because then you would know that everyone would know that these things we think are secure, all the drug dealers and the murderers and the other criminals who use phones to hide data would know that the government was on to them. It's like, you don't want to know that we can see a license plate from space so that we can listen to your conversations, from a plane, a balloon, or whatever flying overhead.
Yeah.
I mean, you as a government kind of hide those capabilities because you don't want to provide your enemies with the information they need to figure out other ways to circumvent what you're doing.
I mean, it's fully possible, and this is just a great cover for what they want done. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, which I actually would like to go down that rabbit hole, but we'll go down it for about an hour and a half, and we'll end up talking about 9/11 at the end. But it's fascinating to see how people have rallied to the defense of Apple in this case, and I can understand that, but in this scenario,
but by the way, if you read their little blog and you see what Tim Cook has said, it's very pro customer, like because we care about you, because we want to do the right thing, we're going to protect your data, blah, 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 whatever. And there are these extremes in this argument. Like, the FBI will say, well, look, it's only about this one phone. And then other people will say, well, it's not about this one phone. Obviously, you're going to want this information on other phones. And the answer, of course, is of course. In fact, there are many examples. Apple has cited many examples where in the past the government has come to them. Of course, it's going to happen all the time. It's not a one-off, right? But it's also not a public tool. It's not a tool they're going to trust to the government. It's something that Apple could, and I think will be forced to do. The other thing, and this really kind of blows my mind, by the way, someone who's dead doesn't have any privacy rights in the United States.
Yeah.
So this person who owned the iPhone has no rights. So we're not violating anyone's privacy.
Well, not only that, he's not even just like a regular person that died. He is a possible, terrorist that murdered all these people.
Yep, of course. But and then taken beyond that, he doesn't own the phone. He was an employee of the county of San Bernardino, which purchased the phone and owns it. They've already given Apple their permission to have that phone be unlocked, and Apple still won't do it.
It's interesting.
It's
Very interesting.
unbelievable.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. It's interesting how it's spun into something that it's not. It's a far cut and dry story.
Just to be clear, for me, like last week when we talked, you said I'm kind of surprised where you fall on this one, because it seems like a lot.
Well, you know why I said that? I'll tell you why I said that, because I wasn't as informed about the case at that point that I am now.
By the way,
after a week,
no one was. No, right. But my stance at that time, I didn't know a lot of this stuff then either. I looked at this more like just kind of a common sense kind of thing. We know that law enforcement, whether it's at the federal or local level, can get search warrants, and they have probable cause. That if they believe that someone is in the act of committing a crime, they can burst through the front door, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Search warrants give us access to information. I should say access to locations where information might be, where there are clues, where you can learn more about the person in question. These things are not handed out willy-nilly. It's not, regardless of your kind of conspiracy theory level, this is a legal process. And I can assure you from deep experience, the law moves really slow. So this is not about us becoming a police state. I mean, these things are already in place. Apple is complaining that the law that governs this stuff is 100 and something years old. Yeah. The Constitution is a couple hundred years old too. And the Constitution is where a lot of the basis
for everything
for this stuff comes from. The search and seizure is in the Constitution.
Yeah.
It's my point last week was common sense. Of course, the law is going to have to catch up with technology, and that if this person is a terrorist or this other person is a non-terrorist murderer or criminal of some other kind, if they have a cell phone, law enforcement needs to be able to get into it to see what's on there because it will have their contacts. It might have information about other plots, information about other people that are still out there. It's so obvious. It's not even worth arguing. That's all last week, that's where my head was at. In the week that's occurred since, you find out all this other information and you realize Apple is literally doing what the DOJ said they were doing.
Yeah.
They're using this as an excuse to market themselves, and I find that to be, like really ugly and
well,
awful.
At the end, they're gonna have to unlock that phone regardless, So
I think
might
so.
as well get some
I think that's
publicity out of it and look like the good guys coming out of it.
And I should say, regardless of your opinion on this, just to kind of cut through the middle a little bit, a court will rule on this.
Absolutely.
And there will be a decision, and there may be an appeal, and maybe there's another decision. Maybe it goes to the Supreme Court, however it works. And maybe that stuff has mostly already happened. I think at some point they were talking about just bringing it to the Supreme Court. At some point there will be a decision on this or just on this kind of case in general, and then we can move forward. I mean, for right now, Apple has basically asked for a congressional panel to kind of talk about the issue, which is a cute way of short-circuiting the law and the legal process. In other words, rather than have the courts just do their normal slow determination and come to a ruling, which I think ultimately will fall on behalf of law enforcement, Apple wants to push back on this stuff. And in this case, it's really ugly because it's a terrorist and he killed people, and there's no excuse for this.
I'm curious to see what happens with this and how the story changes. I'm always fascinated by cases like this, but what do I know? I learn everything about the law by watching The Good Wife. So,
well, okay, but that's actually not a bad grounding in the law. I mean, for a lay person, I mean, this is, and I'm not a lawyer. I don't even play one on a podcast. I don't know. I mean, my grounding in any kind of law at all dates back to when I was force-fed learning some of this stuff for the Microsoft antitrust trial, the original one 15 years ago. That was an ugly opening to how the machinations work. And it's just, I can't see an outcome where it's not about decrypting an encrypted phone. It really isn't. It's about forcing, which is a terrible term. They shouldn't have to be forced, but forcing Apple to abide by the law of the country,
by giving them access to the data on that phone.
Yes.
Yeah. What's interesting? To kind of go to something else, we talk about privacy and nothing is, whatever you do on a connected device, whatever you do on these mobile devices and computers and laptops, the data things are recoverable. Like, it's crazy to think like it's recoverable. And even if this guy deleted stuff, they could probably go in there and retrieve it.
Right.
They on the surface, they may not be able to find it. And people say, well, there was nothing when they got it. But they're going to have to go through analyzing this thing and trying to recover stuff. It's not just like they're going to open the phone and be like, oh, there's nothing here. All right, throw it away. This is going to take a while.
Yeah. I mean, obviously what they're really hoping to find is like, here's a bunch of photos that the idiot took while he was out at the shooting range with the other buddies we didn't even know we had, or here's his full contact list. Let's check these people out.
And who they are.
These are all very reasonable things to do, by the way, after a terrorist attack. I really can't kind of fault them for that. Bill Gates made the comment about kind of overreacting after a terrorist attack, like I think the United States did with the Patriot Act after 9/11, and saying that you have to, there has to be a kind of middle ground where obviously you have to react and do the right thing. You have to also not overreact. We don't want to become a police state. I sort of feel like you could look at England, and there are cameras all over England, out in public. There's almost no street in London where you can't.
Oh, look at Manhattan. I mean, Manhattan's like that at this point too. It's getting. They are literally putting a camera on every single stoplight. Every single stoplight is getting a camera at this point.
Yeah.
And it's, is it for your protection? Yeah, I'm sure that it comes in handy. But is it a nuisance at times? Yeah, that's also that. So you got to figure out which one is worth more to you.
It sounds kind of Big Brother-ish in a way, and of course it kind of is. But you also have to react to the reality of the world you're in. Is terrorism going to become more common here in the United States? Almost certainly. remember that places like Ireland or London,
They've been dealing with it for
Paris
30, 40 years. Yeah.
have been dealing with terrorist attacks and for decades.
Yeah.
And that what you see in England and the UK with regards to security and whatnot is probably based on the bombings that occurred there over the course of many decades from the IRA or whatever groups over many, many years.
It's an interesting discussion to have, and it's interesting to see how it goes off into different things. We went from just a simple, it's a simple, they want access to the phone to why, Big Brother and why are things happening. I'm sure we're going to talk about this more and more, but we should move on to something. Something a little fun, Paul. Right. Mobile World Congress. A couple things there. The Samsung S7 was unveiled, even though we've discussed it and everybody knows what it looks like. I will be getting it. It's coming out. You can pre-order it today, actually. Wow, pre-orders go up today. Yeah, that's nice. I didn't even know that. February 23rd, which is today. Pre-orders start. It's coming out on March 11th. It's going to be on all the big carriers and here in the U.S., AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, and Verizon. And the installment plan, apparently, I'm curious on how this is going to work. Are they all doing this installment plan, $23 a month for an installment plan and $27
where do you see that? Because
in the notes.
Okay. I mean, I guess what I mean is, where is that information from? In other words,
I don't know. Some website.
Okay. So
I don't know. I copy and pasted
all right.
it.
So I guess what I'm asking, let me be more clear.
Yeah.
Apple obviously offers their own installment plans on iPhones, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw they recently added one for upgraders, which is kind of a cool idea. I did see with regards to the S7, S7 Plus, the S7 Edge, that there are installment plans from carriers, right? And so as we've always had. Are you suggesting that Samsung is going to have an installment plan?
Samsung has wanted one. I don't know if they've done it. No, I think this says in the U.S. the big four carriers will offer S7 starting at $23 per month installment plan, and the S7 starting at $27 per month. So $27, $1 or $2 more or less. So here's the thing. I got this last year. I wonder if I could just give this back and I could just get a new one. Like, I'm curious if I could do that with this phone, if they're doing an early thing.
An early upgrade.
Or an early upgrade.
So Apple just offered that capability with iPhone.
The last one, yeah. The Plus. Because there's a couple of reasons why I want this. I want the bigger one.
I mean, I don't know. I don't even know where this is coming from, so I'm not sure who is doing this.
The story, I think, is CNET. So there's a couple of reasons why I want this phone. One, obviously, it's the water resistance, right? Everybody wants to take this and dunk it into spill water all over this thing.
Do you really want to do that?
You know what? I do, actually. I want to do it. I want to get this phone. I want to pour water all over it and see what happens. I want to get it for one. It has a micro SD slot. You could actually add up to 200 gigs of storage to this thing, which is great. It only has a 32 gig capability, and you just get a micro SD and put it in there. The other thing is, I want to see how good the camera is on this thing, because it looks really impressive from what I've seen.
Yeah.
Also, the bigger screen. I want to get the 5.5-inch screen instead of the 5.1-inch screen. But this was the big story here, that Samsung, the S7 and the S7 Edge are coming out on March 11th. And it's interesting because they did get it right with this design. The S5 was a total disaster. And they did get it right with this one, and they really kept things the same.
So it's funny because I have an S5, and I really hate it. And the camera's terrible. It did have waterproof or water resistance, but you had to plug up the USB port. It did have a removable battery, which we still don't have in the S7s. Yeah. I think it had micro SD expansion, which I know the S6 doesn't have. But yeah, I think it is kind of a cluster, isn't it? It's really weird.
Wow, the S7 Edge is $32 a month on Verizon.
Yeah, but if I'm just curious about this, I can't imagine I'm going to be doing this.
What are you doing?
I don't know. Okay,
what are you doing? What do you want to
I don't
buy?
think I'm going to be getting. I don't think I'm going to get an S7.
No?
I don't think it matters how much it costs. Yeah, I think I'm good.
Yeah, I think I'm going to pick one up. The other one, I want to talk to you about this. The HP Elite X3. This looks interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me why I'm interested in this thing. I don't know
Well,
why.
It's a beautiful phone.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. 6-inch, right? I think it was QHD display, like probably 2560 by 1440. Serious high-end specs. This is of course, it's not coming out till end of the summer, but Snapdragon 820, 4 gigs of RAM. I think it was 64 gigs of internal storage with micro SD.
Is this like a little preview of what this mythical Surface phone could possibly be like?
Yeah. So, I saw you that day. So I was in town for the briefing. And we met at Rattle and Hum, and Mary Jo was there and everything. And that was the night I drove home with Daniel from Windows Central, Daniel Rubino. And I kind of wanted to take the train because I wanted to get some work done, but I thought it'd be kind of nice to hash this stuff out with him because he follows Windows Phone as maybe even more closely than I do, actually. And I was kind of curious about this because, of course, the past year has been kind of a down year for Windows Phone. A lot of talk about Windows Phone being dead. How does this impact things? And how does this impact Surface Phone, this presumed Microsoft device? And on the face of it, it's kind of interesting because you think first of all, it's a gorgeous device. For people who don't know, they have a desktop dock, which is a Continuum dock, which Microsoft already sells for the newest phones as well. But they also have like a laptop dock. And it's basically a 12.5-inch laptop, full-size keyboard, battery. There's no processor, there's no RAM, there's no storage. All that stuff comes off the phone. And the cool thing is you don't have to connect them physically. It has next-gen wireless across the board, and you can leave your phone in your pocket, your bag. You just open the laptop, the screen comes on. It's full screen, Continuum, 16 by 9 or whatever, Windows-like experience. Very cool. It doesn't run desktop apps, of course. It's like, it's an ARM device. How does this negate the need for a Surface Phone? And in some ways, you could make the argument kind of that it does. And we kind of hashed out a couple of ideas about, if Microsoft was still going to make a Surface Phone, because they are working on one, how could that make sense, or what might they do that makes that make sense? I mean, one of the big things, by the way, is that the Elite X3 is only sold to businesses. It's a commercial device. It's going to be very expensive to buy individually. It's not going to be sold at retail. It's not going to be sold by carriers. It will be carrier unlocked, and they are working with particular carriers. In the U.S., I think it's only AT&T. Absolutely not Verizon, by the way. So, sorry, no Verizon. To certify the devices, because this is designed to be sold in volume to businesses who will then roll it out to their users. But there are other things. First of all, Surface Phone could be sold at retail. Okay, there's that. It will have this Surface look and feel. I think that's important to some people. Surface Pen, we already know that's coming. Panos Panay's already hinted at that. The camera, what about a PureView camera? If you think about a Lumia 1020 or a 930 like you have, or 1520 or the 950s, awesome cameras. Maybe they could do a next-gen, PureView camera on the thing. So there's some stuff.
By the way, the battery on this, a 4,100 milliamp battery, that is gigantic.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if it's a business device, so you want this phone to last the entire day, and they know that people are going to be using it.
Oh, and it's going to work with these, other things too. You kind of want it to be able to handle being attached to a laptop and you're on a plane or whatever, getting work done with a keyboard. It has to really work.
Okay, so let's talk about the Continuum aspect of this device.
Mm-hmm. I should have gotten this ready. This is a cool demo, by the way. Because no one uses Windows 10 Mobile, they probably don't understand how this works.
Okay.
And it's really cool. For all of the limitations of Windows phones, right? Apps, primarily. Windows 10 Mobile with a modern phone, your 930, I think, does this. In fact, I'm pretty sure it does. If you get a Miracast adapter,
okay,
plug it into
like a dongle,
yeah, like the Microsoft one, which is the best one. In Windows Phone 8 and 8.1, what you could do is you connect with Miracast and it becomes this external display. And so what you would see up on the screen would be your phone home screen, kind of, it looks weird because most of the screen's blank, but you see it this way. And if you turn the phone sideways and you're like looking at a movie, it would basically fill the screen. And, it's your basic remote display. Actually, Android works the same way. Android will work with Miracast in exactly the same way, and that's fine. But where Continuum kind of takes off is just with that Miracast dongle, that same connection. It's not duplicating the screen. It puts the screen up on that screen, and by default, the screen on your phone becomes a trackpad. And if you move your finger on the phone's surface, a little mouse cursor appears up on the screen, and you're moving it with your finger, and it lets you navigate the phone like it's a computer, and you get like a desktop. So it's not your portrait style home screen or start screen, and we call it Windows Phone or Windows Mobile. It's a Windows 10 style desktop with a start menu. And when you open the start menu, it's the phone menu, right? And the apps that run in that full screen mode, landscape mode, continuum mode, whatever you want to call it, are available in the start screen. And the ones that don't, because obviously some older apps or poorly written apps or whatever won't run in that mode, they're kind of grayed out, right? And this is the universal app platform at work. And so when you have the Groove app, which is the Microsoft's music app on Windows Phone and Windows 10 Mobile, when you're looking at it on the phone, it's a phone app. It takes up the whole screen. It's portrait orientation. You touch it with your finger, it works great. But when you run it through a continuum up to another screen, 1080p screen, it runs like a PC app. It's also full screen, but now it's this big app that goes out this way. So the icons all fill the screen. It looks really nice. And that's the whole point of this app platform. But then you take it a step further, you could add to this thing Bluetooth mouse and keyboard, and now you have a whole wireless kind of PC setup. You could have a hardware dock where your phone is being charged with the dock, and those peripherals could be connected with cables for a better connection, better performance, connect the screen that way, et cetera. And that's the Continuum solution, and that's what HP is doing. And so, you have this phone you carry around, it works like a phone. Plug it into a dock or use the wireless Miracast stuff, and it works like a PC. And while you're using it like a PC, you can, mouse and keyboard now, instead of using the trackpad on the screen, use it like a phone. So if you get a phone call, it's still a phone. You can pick it up and make a phone call. Send text messages. It's a really cool feature. It's a really differentiator.
It is really cool. But where it comes down, where the Surface phone makes sense, right? Like we're talking like this is a great phone. The Lumia line is a great phone. The 950 and 950 XL. Where does a Surface phone make sense? Obviously, Continuum makes a lot of sense for it. And if it's Intel-based, then it makes a lot of sense.
So I have some information about that.
Okay.
Because I talked to Michael Park, I think his name was. This is the guy who runs HP's mobile stuff, the guy in charge of the phone. First thing I asked him was, I get what you're saying. Like, this makes sense. There's a whole thing I didn't talk about around remote applications. You've got line of business apps and a big business that are up on a data center. You can run them, not virtually, but you run them kind of remotely through the phone, on the big screen like a PC. I get it. But if this thing was an x86 device, if it was an Intel device, you could just run those apps on the phone. Like,
desktop apps, yeah.
Why didn't you use Intel? And they talked to Intel. And by the way, they talked to Google about Android. They talked to Apple about iPhone as well. And for a variety of reasons, none of those things could work. But on the Intel side, I was told that they're a couple of years away from getting the power management and the performance working in a phone form factor that obviously they looked at this, but it just didn't.
And that's been a problem with Intel. I mean, it's still amazing that we're in 2016 and they're still having those same issues that they did, 3 years ago.
Yeah. And it casts doubt on the viability today or this year of an Intel-based Surface phone.
Yeah.
Right? Because
unless they do the Surface phone, they do the Surface Pro phone. We're back to square one. Back to where we were a couple of years ago with the Surface and Surface Pro. I don't know. I mean, for me, the most intriguing aspect of a Surface phone would be it running, Intel x86 and running applications. And when I dock it, I could run all my desktop apps. And when I undock it, I'm running all the stuff that, runs on the phone.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not alone.
Yeah.
Believe me. And it's funny when we talk about Windows Phone and the death of Windows Phone and what's going on with Windows Phone and all the angst and all that stuff. This stuff is kind of the future of it. Windows Phone has no future as a retail thing that's going to compete with Android and iPhone. It's not working. Although it isn't, hopefully we'll still get some Mobile World Congress stuff. A bunch of Windows Phones announced at this thing, right?
A lot.
Most of them
Yeah.
not aimed at businesses. Right? So why would anyone jump into this market at this time? I actually can't explain why. I guess I would just remind people that as part of that strategy change from last July, Microsoft's goal was to get out of the phone hardware business as much as possible, that they would still make some aspirational devices. They would still make some devices that they could sell in very specific markets, but they lose money every time they sell a phone. And what they want to do is minimize those losses and kind of invigorate a partner ecosystem where it works like PCs, where other companies are making these things. A smaller company, especially a small company that has hardware manufacturing expertise, they're already making Android phones, for example. We're kind of talking about the same thing here. It's not a lot of effort to make a Windows Phone version of an Android phone, sell it in those markets where Windows Phone does relatively well. There are parts of Europe where Windows Phone does approach 10% market share, and not worry about it. Whereas for Microsoft, they can't do that without losing money on those phones. I think for a smaller company, it's a smaller business, but it's okay for them, and maybe it works out. I don't actually think any of these companies are going to go gangbusters on Windows Phone.
No, I don't think so either. You know what is
some of them are
interesting,
doing
though?
it.
I'll tell you something. I have that OnePlus One, the phone, and Cyanogen is getting really immersed in Microsoft applications.
Yeah.
Like it's really,
Yeah,
and that's interesting to me that they're really experimenting with this. Like I have Cortana on my phone now,
right.
and I have all
and
these things built in on this phone, and from what I read, it's going to be
Cyanogen's
even
the one.
more.
Yeah, it's Microsoft has a number of places they're trying to go with mobile. Obviously, they make apps just for Android and iOS, and there's a lot going on there. But Cyanogen is a real foot in the door with Android that kind of goes a step beyond what they can do on stock Android or any Android device. And this is something I don't fully understand, but I think this week, as part of Mobile World Congress, Cyanogen announced kind of a mod extensibility system for their OS. And Microsoft at that time announced a number of things that they would ship as mods for Cyanogen.
I think it's Skype, Cortana, and OneNote, right? Skype. There was another one. What was it? Skype, Cortana, OneNote, and
Hyperlapse was
Hyperlapse.
one.
Yeah. It's interesting though. It's interesting that they're strategic partners, and a lot of people are now saying, well, maybe this is what they're looking at if doesn't work and they can't. Windows phones aren't selling. Not that it's going to go away, but this is how they kind of get into the Android world. Just smart.
Yeah, I think I don't think Microsoft's goal is to have one path, for mobile. I think it's going to be wide. They'll do as much as they can on iOS. There are some things they can't do on iOS because it's a lockdown system. They'll be able to do more on Android, but they can do even more with Cyanogen, where they kind of become part of the OS. They can bundle their apps on phones. I didn't see it as part of the Samsung announcement, but last year Samsung announced that they were bundling Microsoft apps on some of their devices. It'd be kind of interesting if that was happening with these new S7 devices.
Yeah. You know what I did see at Mobile World Congress? These little, how they have those like little PCs, like you have the Kangaroo, right?
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of Android-based ones, and they were modified Android to look like a desktop. Every one of them that they showed off, guess what applications they had running on the desktop?
Oh, Office.
Yeah. And I
because when
I
you're
thought
looking
to
at
myself,
something,
wow, that's scary. Not in the sense, not for me. I mean, it's great for the consumer, but for Microsoft, that has to be a little alarming. That, oh my God, $120 you're paying for this thing, and now you have Office on here because it's running Android.
Right.
You're getting. I don't know if that's a negative or positive. We talk about being on all different platforms, but when you have it on a computer, is that good?
It's like a judo strategy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you take another platform's strength and you make it your strength. We wake up one day and it's possible now to have not even Cyanogen, I'm just talking like any Android device, where the lock screen is a Microsoft lock screen. And you sign in and the launcher screen, the home screen, is a Microsoft launcher screen. And the keyboard you access when you have to type anything on that phone is a Microsoft keyboard, right? And not just SwiftKey, which they bought, But today they came out with something, I think it was called Keyboard Hub
Yeah.
or Hub Keyboard. I guess Hub Keyboard, which if you haven't looked at, please do. It's pretty amazing. And then you, of course, have the Microsoft apps. I mean, I don't think many people are going to be running like Groove Music on their Android device per se, but Skype and Office and the many, many Garage apps, that Hub Keyboard is one of the many Garage apps. There's a whole Microsoft experience happening on Android that is astonishing.
Yeah.
You know, it really is. It's.
I was shocked when I mean, I know that it's on Android, but I didn't think, I saw that was a big trend, with these little mobile PCs where everything's running Android, latest version of Android. Everything had Skype and all the Office apps right in the front. Because now, look, you don't like Google apps? Oh, yeah, forget about that. Look, you have Office.
It's not even that. Look, we all know that a phone can play Candy Crush. You can send Snapchats. You can take pictures, send text messages and emails and all the basic stuff we all do on our phones. Throw Office into the mix. Now you're selling a device, right? I mean, this is something you can get work done on. If you are trying to convince a wife or a boss, who's another kind of a wife, that you deserve this device, I mean, you can point to this and say, but it's not just for Candy Crush. I'm not just doing Facebook on here.
That's the name of the show, by the way. It's not just not just for Candy Crush. The name of the show.
Right. But I think that's the thing. And so it's Microsoft has a nice lock on productivity. It's their strength. It's something that's now available everywhere. A lot of these apps are even available on Amazon's devices, which is crazy. So I think it's, I obviously, as a Windows Phone fan, I would have preferred for that platform to have taken off, but there's some interesting stuff going on there. And I wouldn't mind seeing Microsoft work with Cyanogen to integrate live tile support into, that platform and bring those capabilities to a system that has the potential to sell in much bigger numbers.
I've gone to Cyanogen's website. Let me see what the latest version is. I'm running 12S on this one, but I'm curious if there's a newer version. 12.1 are the nightlies. 13's not out yet.
I bet the thing they announced is something that will, be, well, actually it does say 12.1. Yeah, there's a 13.0
Yeah, 13.0. Yeah, 13.0 is the new one. Yeah, I got to play around with this. I do have a weird issue, and I was hoping the audience could help us with this.
Okay.
And I'll talk about it now before I wrap up. I like to keep certain things, like certain information. Let's say Social Security, copies of my Social Security card, right? Now let me find something else. Let's say, and this isn't the case. I have a list of I have like a PDF of passwords, right? And I did have a PDF. It wasn't passwords, but I have a PDF, and I had it on my phone. I deleted it off the phone because I moved it all to an SD card. This is what happened to my SD card. My dog ate the SD card. Okay.
Oh, jeez, what?
This was last week. So, but what I had also done, I deleted the file off my phone.
Yeah.
So now I need to retrieve that file. It's not like Windows where we have a trash can that I could go to.
So you should ask Apple to do this for you because they have a tool.
Yeah, they have a tool. So on my Android phone, I need to retrieve the data. Well, you can if it's rooted very easily with a number of applications. It's not rooted. If I root it, it's going to delete everything. So I found a way that if you mount the phone to Windows, right, and it mounts the hard drive, it mounts the SD card, and it gives it a drive letter, I could use an application, a data recovery application, to recover the data. Hopefully, it hasn't been overwritten. I highly doubt it is, but let's say it's still there.
Okay.
Android after Android, I guess 4.0, they removed the feature where you could mount the hard drive. So now I'm trying to figure out a way to mount this hard drive as if it's a drive. Like I want to mount the phone as if it's a drive and run the data recovery and recover that file. Now, is it I can most likely recreate it, but I thought it would be interesting to try to recover this. Is this even possible? Can I recover this file without having to root this phone? This is the question I present to the audience. For all our Android users. Did you follow that, Paul?
Only a little bit. So you're saying that there used to be a feature in Android that will allow you to mount this thing as a hard drive, essentially, as a drive, and then access the information. But you would have had to have. Did you?
I could access the information. I could access the information that's on there, not deleted information. So I actually want to run a data recovery as if it's a hard drive. Now, I can get this file. I could most likely find it somewhere, but I thought it would be interesting for me to try to recover it from the phone. So, is it possible to do that?
Fun. See, this is I can see where you're failing.
Where am I failing?
You thought that this would be fun to do it from the phone.
Yeah, I thought it'd be fun to do it from the phone, or I just want to see if it's possible. You know, like I want to learn if it's possible to do this. I went down this rabbit hole, and I was like, you know what? Let me try to get it from this. I don't know. There are data recovery stuff. Like there are ways to recover data, but you need to root the phone. And in order to root the phone, you need to wipe everything off. So that would totally wipe everything off. Like that would do like a real wipe, and you can't recover anything if that's the case. So you have to be, I'm trying to figure out how to do it. Just an idea.
Right. I wouldn't use a phone for this purpose, but
yeah, I mean, listen, it was just an idea. I just want to try it out. See what happens.
Right.
I'm curious if it's even possible. So it was something I'm throwing out there. So if anybody has an idea, let me know. I'm curious if you could do that on Android. All right, Paul. We're going to do our wrap-up show. We're going to do our post show right now. Yep. If you're watching live, stay tuned. You can watch and you can listen, and we're going to be recording another 15, 20 minutes. If not, if you're listening to the podcast, you could access the show by going to patreon.com/whatthetech. Last week's show, I put it up there for everybody to watch. I interviewed Brad. Brad was the guest last week on the show, and he was great.
Yeah, how was that?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I had a great time.
Good.
I had a great time. And I spoke to him about, I just continued the discussion. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed having Brad on. Hopefully he'll be on, and maybe three of us will do a show next week, in a couple of weeks. So it'll be fun. Patreon.com/whatthetech. If you want to help us out at the GFQ Network, you could use our Amazon link by going to gfq.co/Amazon, bookmarking. Whenever you buy something, use our link. We get a tiny little credit from it. Everything Paul Thurrott, go to thurrott.com. Anything new coming up, Paul?
Yeah, actually, so I'm going to Redmond on Sunday, and we're having a meetup on Monday night. Mary Jo will be there, and Brad will be there, and we'll see who else will be there. But Microsoft's having kind of a virtual event next week that we're taking part in. We have to be there physically, not virtually, but the event will be available, for 3 days for everybody. But on Monday night, we're going to have that meetup, and I can't find the place where it's at. I'm sorry. But if you are in the area, just send me an email, and I can let you know where it is. Yeah. I'll post something about it on my site, too.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, boys and girls, we'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.